Hello and welcome to The Smartest Moron, where finally we end this review series on the most convoluted set of games I have ever tackled. At least on this channel anyway. I'm debating which is harder to find info for, this or Kingdom Hearts. Then again, the latter has an ongoing mobile game meant to give more lore, so maybe it wins this round. At the same time, trying to get info for what happened between Game 2 and 3 when the game first became available had to have been a major pain in the ass, mainly for those in Europe who only got Game 2. Fortunately, I put up a video regarding that side content, so before diving into this review, you may want to check those out. Despite that complication, and despite Xenosaga 2 easily being one of the worst RPGs I have covered on this show, Xenosaga 3 is one of the best RPGs I've ever covered, improving on a lot of aspects from both games. If the series had this level of consistency with the visuals and gameplay, it probably would have turned out a hell of a lot better. This is almost like the Devil May Cry 3 of RPGs, where it can kind of be a dizzying experience diving into Game 3 after playing the abysmal second game. However, there are still some issues regarding the plot. Then there's the censorship with the blood that it just looks awkward. Would some of those scenes have really bumped the game up to an M rating? Out of context, it makes this scene with Xion just look so damn weird. For that reason, I will also be skipping the story section since, well, it's the third game in the series and this game already feels like two games mashed into one. And hearing that from my friends made me worry that I would still only like this game for shallow reasons. Just look at the Figmas I bought of my favorite characters for crying out loud. I'm proud to say not only does Game 3 hold up, it's also much better than I remember in both gameplay and story. To a certain point. So let's dive right in and see why I feel that way.
You better run!
There have been quite a few changes since the last two games, and some elements have been taken out entirely. There is no longer an event wheel to give either side an advantage, and things feel more like a straightforward RPG. One new thing added though is the break meter. Once built, the character is broken and cannot move for 2 turns, and is susceptible to more critical hits. This can be healed with spells, but once broken, you have to tough it out. And unfortunately, you can't swap out characters either with this status effect, so you have to be extremely careful about being broken. The boost meter is now used to perform special attacks too. No matter who dies by it though, you will gain a boost in experience and skill points. It counts for per enemy and can even work on bosses too, making that boost meter have much more of a purpose than before, though you can still use it to interrupt enemies and can even use it consecutively. Turns are more fair in this title, so it won't be like in Game 1 where a boss will keep attacking every other turn. Special attacks can also level up the more they're used, making them far more useful. Characters will naturally learn more as they level up, though in the case of some characters, those special moves have to be earned in the story. Junior and Chaos also level up their moves a bit differently. See, their level 1 technique can steal the souls of Bio and Gnosis type enemies, though Chaos can only absorb the latter. This in turn powers up certain moves of theirs. So basically they are a picky version of Shang Tsung.
Your soul is mine.
There's still many new factors to consider as well. Apart from the broken status effect, some characters can learn how to counter moves or even follow up attacks with another strike. And of course, there are resistances to consider as well to make battles flow much quicker. Even your equipment has some more importance, as some stuff like bracelets can increase defenses against certain elements, or rings and necklaces that also give some useful passives. They can even increase the max boost you got to pull off better special attacks. And there's no complicated system to get accessory passives either. Just equip what you want and you're set just like any other RPG. The only slight complex thing beyond boosting is the skill line. Each character has 2 paths, each one specializing in a different field. For example, Momo has 2 trees that can give her a higher level of ether spells, or try to make her good at breaking enemies a tad faster. Both trees tend to have something characters would want in their arsenal, so you might toy around with both. You can even see some skills ahead of time to see if you want those, or just some bonus stats to make the character stronger. And as you explore levels, you might uncover keys that can grant chances to gain even more stats and skills that particular characters may not naturally learn, like teaching KOS-MOS ether spells she otherwise lacks access to. There is a bonus too if you complete a skill line, with a special ether spell that can grant extremely useful abilities, though for an extremely high EP cost. Some of these skills are abused by bosses anyway, so you know you want these ASAP. Unlike the last 2 games, this one is stingy in giving you items to refill your EP, so you may tend to switch out party members often if you aren't grinding. The ES combat also received a massive upgrade, making things a bit more complicated and more interesting as a result. No longer is there a boost function, and all ESs have what is called an anima gauge. Building this will allow you to enter a state where you can use special attacks and the energy to use certain attacks is decreased, allowing for more hits. These attacks also have certain accuracy levels, and unless you have certain equipment, you need to focus on building a combo. For example, against this boss that has a high evasion rate, I need to build up enough hits with weaker attacks before laying on much bigger damage to ensure everything hits. And it's important you don't miss, otherwise the combo ends abruptly. Much like the special attacks from the on-foot portions, finishing off enemies with these moves grants bonus experience and skill points, and levels up the attack itself. Sometimes there can even be follow-up attacks depending on what you have. And the ESs are fairly customizable. Unlike in Game 2 though, they can't level up and require upgrades throughout the game. Through the use of discs, they allow you to equip certain items to nullify certain attacks like counter moves, which you want immediately given how often these enemies pull them off. You can even change the weapons of the ES and make them function differently. For example, by giving up the pile bunker and other sidearm for the Asher, you gain a twin machine gun attack. Downside is that I couldn't check the accuracy for these weapons unless in a fight. Actually, there is one more problem. Item usage. A lot of bosses feel like an endurance test sometimes, requiring characters to be healed or they will die quick and often. Failing to keep up with the upgrades even once is likely going to result in your death, because these enemies hit hard and fast, thus requiring you to always heal. There is technically a defense option that can also refill your health, and while it works, you'll have to predict when an enemy will use their most damaging attack, which isn't easy until the game starts to end and they start to telegraph those attacks much more often. Now that's not to say the action isn't fun to watch. It's frickin' giant robots, of course it's frickin' fun. And some tension is built up if you screw up even once. Traps have also changed their function in Xenosaga. Back then, you have to depend on the level design to provide traps and lure enemies into them. Now you have up to 10 traps at a time and set them yourself. Since the event wheel is no longer a thing, traps will allow you to gain a bonus boost and a chance to go at them from behind. Attacking from behind naturally does more damage and boosts the critical hit rate. Though failing to kill everyone, they will kick your ass and swarm you. I tended not to use these a lot, not because they weren't useful or anything. On the contrary, this is the best way they could be handled and can even be done in the ES. I have hoarding issues. If you're ever low on traps, they can easily be bought at the store for dirt cheap. I'm just being a stubborn idiot, like I proved in my Parasite Eve review. For those wondering, no, my hoarding habits, yeah, they haven't gotten any better. Not in the least. I have a problem, help me! There's also one status spec to worry about when you fight the Gnosis, which can crystallize characters. But as you could tell from the footage, I never encountered it. There's a reason for that. There are these resist items that can help the character, and me having a ton of money, I ended up just buying a ton, and since I didn't really fight the Gnosis often until late game, well, pretty much everyone was resistant to it already. The only reason I know that it exists for sure is because it happened during my last playthrough over a decade ago. And the level design is pretty much what you expect, with some fairly tough puzzles thrown in, still no map, but at the same time not really necessary, etc. The only level I actually hated going through was the Merkaba due to all the back traveling. Otherwise, there are solid fights throughout, and I enjoyed my playthrough. Well, there might be a few more issues depending on your taste. You see, the game tends to suffer from slowdown during certain points. Not enough to ruin the gameplay, but it is noticeable, especially in cutscenes. This is likely why the presentation also relies on cutscenes switching back and forth between cutscenes with movements to these ones focusing more on the models and character portraits to tell the story. It only became distracting when fights were transitioning from cutscene to combat, where it would freeze for a bit before starting the fight. Outside of that though, combat is initiated almost as soon as you touch a foe, and with such fast animations, battles are unlikely going to take 10 minutes like in Game 2. The other issue is the lack of side quests. There aren't many and they don't have a lot of story to them, and even then some of those side quests were mainly just to get the ultimate weapons. The one exception deals with the Dark Professor, a character from the post-game of Xenosaga 2 that I never bothered to meet. Throughout the game, you can also collect Erde Kaiser's ether spells for everyone from these gold doors. Once you get all three, you can properly challenge Erde Kaiser Sigma, who will whoop your ass if you don't use them correctly and are underprepared. This is why those super skills are so damn helpful. Even if you don't accept this challenge, the Erde Kaiser ether spells are very handy. Sure, they eat up a ton of EP, but they do a lot of damage and can break enemies significantly easier, even bosses. And if you somehow beat Erde Kaiser Sigma, congrats! You won the game. Seriously, I blitzed through the final dungeon with ease thanks to this spell, and bosses took a ton of damage. I even boosted Momo with a certain skill, and well, it destroyed the final boss with no issues. I consider it a fair fight though. It was robot versus fricking robot. There is at least one minigame, Hackux, or however the hell you pronounce that, that can be accessed at a certain point, where you can solve complex puzzles by guiding characters to certain holes using timed button presses to manipulate the area. I didn't play too much since one part was kinda bullcrap and I couldn't nail down the timing, but you can get some decent stuff. It's also the only way to get Junior's ultimate weapon, which kinda made me feel dumb since I made him steal so many kills. Overall, the gameplay is simple and good while offering some challenge, and that's all I really wanted out of it. Even without the few side quests there are, the game is still likely to give you between 30 and 40 hours of fun. But does the story manage to end on a satisfying note? It's time to head into the spoiler section right now.
Jin Uzuki. As a warrior, and as a man, I will leave my mark upon the world!
As an extra warning, I would like to remind everyone that I'm not going to talk about every single subject. I want to focus on other elements that I actually cared about, rather than fumbling with ideas that don't interest me. And you'll soon see why I did that in a moment. Taking place after a missing year, the story shows how Xion quit Vector and is working with the group Scientia to discover more info about the UMN and see why her father was involved with some shady stuff. So a corporation turns out to be evil. Shock of shocks in this day and age. Excuse me 1 minute. Sorry about that. Anyway, the gang is slowly brought back together, with the team needing Xion and KOS-MOS' help in retrieving the Elsa from danger. Though before that, the villain factions are introduced to us, with Utik, now branded as Ormus, but you're still gonna call them Utik anyway, still trying to take down the team and reclaim their holy land because of religious belief in crazy people. Meanwhile, Dmitry Yuriev has gained control of the Federation and is trying to oppose Ormus, while revealing his team worked on a project to replace KOS-MOS with a being called t-elos. Ah, the dark half trope. I don't care how overused it is, I always enjoy it for some bizarre reason, barring Goku Black, but I guess that doesn't count. t-elos isn't completely out of left field though. In Game 1, when Junior is raiding a ship, there are plans regarding t-elos, but since the information was lost during a battle, he was unable to recover it, so I wouldn't be surprised if he forgot the details. Yuriev even makes a bias test to have KOS-MOS lose to t-elos. While t-elos is able to take care of a massive amount of Gnosis, KOS-MOS is forced to face against Omega. Okay, so this bad boy was part of the final boss in Game 2, and Sergius was supposed to use it. Supposedly, because he never did, and once again he had plenty of time to do so. KOS-MOS sadly doesn't stand a chance right now, leaving her project to get scrapped. So the gang are already against some steep odds as they try to help KOS-MOS to help the Elsa, but then you remember another faction, the Testaments. The red one in particular, when not being a snobby jackass that Alan somehow manages not to punch in the face, did create t-elos. And unfortunately, t-elos is around 5 times stronger and utterly decimates KOS-MOS later, with her foe only able to do a small scratch at best. That being said, the fight scene is freaking awesome and I remember why I love these two. All until t-elos destroys KOS-MOS. Yeah, I never quite recovered from this. However, right after this fight, the gang also faced their greatest story foe yet.
Time travel! Wait, no, don't click off the video yet!
Yeah, even Xenosaga isn't crazy enough to use this as a storytelling tool. When they do go to the past on Miltia before the Gnosis were summoned, it's technically in Xion's subconscious, and with briefly resurrected souls or something. I assume so anyway, considering events play out and we see them without Xion. To clear up this confusion, you do technically need other devices in order to dive into the subconscious of someone else. And when it happened, it was in the middle of a fight with no such device around, so it was very easy to make that assumption. They find past versions of many people, including Virgil in his younger form, and previously met the Testament form in a boss fight right before t-elos. During their time here, Virgil bonds with a Realian named Pabronia that I will go into more detail later. They even find out that Kevin worked alongside Xion's dad, and was a massive asshat. I will also go into detail about this later, unfortunately. The reason it feels like two games are mashed together is right towards the end of Disc 1. Throughout this part of the story, Xion eventually finds out her dad was trying to save his family with these experiments, used by the Utik organization, and even fed info back into the Federation since he didn't trust Utik. Jin of course knew about all of this, which raises the question as to why he never said anything, though we see then why he never spoke about it, for when Xion's parents are murdered, it's revealed Xion had summoned the Gnosis through her despair, and that the Testaments were also using her. It's definitely the Xion show for the most part, and after the Junior show in episode 2, I can kinda understand why they did this. And the other characters end up feeling like they don't add much. They do get some moments, like KOS-MOS getting her upgraded form, Alan finally going into the front lines to save Xion, temporarily anyway, and Jin's past is given a bit more detail. However, those details are small and I ended up just wishing there was more. But then we get to Disc 2 where the antagonist focus shifts to Yuriev, and honestly, this was the weakest part of the plot for me due to not seeing Yuriev around more in the first half. Not that it's bad or anything, as Yuriev demonstrates he's smarter and more interesting than Sergius, outwitting the team and striking when they are most vulnerable. For God's sake, his giant robot actually does something! The character focus is kinda skewed here, focusing mostly on Junior and characters related to him, and with how the dungeon and final battles for his arc looks, I wouldn't be surprised if Yuriev was meant as the final boss of his own Xenosaga game. And unfortunately, this kinda harms Xian's character since it just kinda pauses on her trauma and she doesn't really do much. Also, there's a kid named Abel who I'm sure Xenogear fans recognize. Since I haven't beaten it, I can't fully comment on his character, so he just feels there, even when stuff like Udo is involved. Speaking of Udo, the threat of it is kinda downplayed in favor of Wilhelm. To sum it up, it may not be evil and just some elder god or something whose mere presence makes people go nuts as opposed to actively harming someone like he's Palpatine or something. Otherwise, it seems to be a peaceful being. For one example, he keeps talking to Xian, and one of those was about her good memories about Kevin.
Even if I were to be born again.
Eternally.
Over and over.
Over and over.
Over and over.
Over and over. And then we switch positions where I grab the strap on from under the bed and then proceed.
Plus some plot elements like with Voyager and Ziggy are saved for near the end of the game, with info on Pied Piper literally in a database in the final dungeon, and all after his boss fight. If you never saw Pied Piper, you would be confused as all hell, and some important details like the goal of the Testaments and Wilhelm, who is later revealed to have been manipulating everyone, is crammed into the last 2 hours of the game, which includes finally explaining who KOS is. And of course, my eyes start to glaze over in some spots, so I don't really want to go into a deep summary regarding all of the story. Otherwise, I feel we'd be here for several hours, and I would once again be like Patrick with the piece of wood nailed to my head. As such, the main focus will surround Xian, since this is mostly her story this time around. However, I can't say the plot is bad. Characters are still interesting with most motivations making sense, and I want to see their development, to see what was going to happen next. Action scenes are of course still wonderful, barring this one t-elos fight they felt the need to add shaky cam to, plus some scenes can be questionable given who the gang have on their side, like they disappeared from the story or busy punching someone else in the face. Granted, that one is a problem on a lot of RPGs it seems, even Shadow Heart's Covenant as one example. I love seeing the interactions, and even if KOS doesn't really do much, he's still responsible for one of my favorite jokes in the game. See, in Game 2, Kanan and KOS were battling in the sky with giant robots, and Kanan had to abandon a weapon. Where it fell to...
Look out! Junior! Damn it! Try thinking about what's below when you're fighting!
Sorry.
One of the major themes I noticed was how some characters chase a lie and revert back to aggression. Almost all the villains do this. Virgil's one of the biggest examples. I never talked about him much in Game 1 since he didn't really contribute much to the plot. Granted, as much as he really hated Realians and...
She smells good. I've fallen in love already.
is very close to having a restraining order placed on him. Anyway, he still does his job regardless. He doesn't like Xian in the slightest and hates the Realians, but he's not grabbing them like toys in a fight and throwing them against the Gnosis. He does his job as best as he can against a near unstoppable force, and further works together with Xian until his death. The only time he does something reprehensible is to activate the Realian self-destruct code, which is something Xian had and kept around at all times. And in his defense, and I don't like defending this, the Realians were kinda dead. Maybe. I honestly don't know. Point is, I can kinda understand desperate times call for desperate measures, especially from a character that's not really meant to be a superhero or anything. This is even brought back up when Xian is trying to get Virgil out of the area and gives him the code to protect him. And in the past, he hated being saved by a Realian since he had comrades that died to those beings, so it was easy to project his hatred to all of them. They were no different from other weapons like androids. Over time though, as Fabronia helped his wounds, he began to bond with her, along with Xian who just wanted to see him happy. So when shit started to go down with the Song of Nephilim turning Realians crazy, he tried his best to protect Fabronia despite being injured, only to watch as she sacrificed herself, and was apparently being eaten based on what I'm hearing.
moments like this when you realize that everyone in this freaking game needs a therapist.
After the adult Xion tries to save him, he sacrifices himself to take down the Realians with the code. Though again, not time travel, so the Virgil Testament is able to appear for a boss fight, which already causes some doubt to the whole time travel thing to begin with. Then again, multiverse theory is always a thing, and technically speaking, I was told the Xeno universe is basically a universe in its own right, and that there are multiple levels like the Xenoblade games, the Xenogear games, and I'm just rambling again while my brain breaks. The point of the Virgil Testament coming here is the dialogue where he claims how he and Xion are alike, just like in Game 1, saying how her having the self-destruct code was proof of that they'll do anything to survive. The argument arguably didn't have much weight back then, but now, especially with events about to happen, he isn't wrong. He's the first character to demonstrate how chasing a lie, running away from what he feared the most, ended up making him into a monster. Hell, the part of revenge is technically right, for when Xion was hunting for the truth, she disregarded many people who were in her way. Granted, she wasn't the most unlikable character by doing that, and hell, I actually liked her doing this, as it demonstrated potential growth down the line of the story. She only drops it for Kevin, and even then, she pushes aside her own friends even further, at least proving her obsession made her as blind and ignorant as Virgil. Debatably more so given Virgil's group aren't exactly his friends. Virgil reveals he tried to forget all about Fabronia, the incident scarring him so much he likely couldn't function. So much like with Xion, he sealed that part of his memory away. So it was much easier to pin his hate on all Realians just to forget the trauma. Even as he tries to deny it to Fabronia's spirit, who suddenly appears out of nowhere like an RKO, that lie he forged begins to crumble, unable to take the guilt even as he keeps shouting. The conversation even shows the lack of hope that the antagonist would suffer from as well, pushing them further into the darkness. And we already saw this with Albedo in Game 2 with how he just gave up and wanted to die, as opposed to seeking Junior's forgiveness. When Virgil finally has the comfort from the woman he grew to care for, realizing what he really wanted opposed the goal of the Testaments, only then is he able to peacefully pass on and find his redemption. In a way, death was the only option for him given how battle crazy he could be and how far he fell. Death held its own kind of hope for Virgil, as all he really wanted was to be with the woman who saved his life. It may even be why in the first game, the last thing he saw was a vague image of Fabronia. My only major complaint is that his character stuff had such a gigantic gap between games, since the second one does nothing for him. Even his reappearance as a Testament in Game 1 was used mostly for setup to establish some characters that died in the game could potentially come back as a Testament to oppose the party. And after this moment, Xion proves he was right, echoing some of the stuff Virgil goes through. And the major turning point was watching her parents die, when she is thrown into despair after remembering her past, realizing the terrible truth that she summoned the Gnosis back then. Jin likely never talked about this because, well, to a regular person, the idea itself is pretty ridiculous, and I doubt he knew there was a way she could even remember something like this. Honestly, I'm not even sure if there is a way to prove it and make sure she is calm after dooming the universe. But I could be wrong there. The point is she is overcome with fear and latches on to Kevin, despite all the deeds in this game not exactly painting him as the best person in the world.
But the Kevin in this time, he sacrificed all those people, all those Realians to research the Zohar, even my mother.
I had no choice. I'm sorry I made you suffer. But you must understand that it was all done for you.
For me? This? Are you saying all of this was for me?
It was all for you. I was always thinking about you.
Oh, trust me. The rant is incoming very, very soon.
Which leads me to another thing. The fear of death and how it overcomes someone. Believe it or not, people like Yuriev and Voyager were afraid of voodoo and dying. They let their fear drive them into becoming monsters, not caring who got hurt in the process, sacrificing other lives and even selling their own souls to Wilhelm. I mean, at least Voyager and Virgil got a good deal by becoming Stan users. Xion could arguably fall into that category as well, considering that she is apparently dying. Also, there was a plot point that apparently KOS-MOS was using up her life energy, but honestly, it's never brought up again, so for all I know, Kevin could just be lying about that. The villains in Xion are thus unable to think clearly beyond just Udo and their own imminent demise. Voyager even tried to defy Wilhelm and ascend beyond him to become a god, which was all a trick by Kanan to apparently touch an item that could destroy them both. Yeah, even after beating this game, I'm really not sure what the hell this thing is beyond an observational tool, and I don't think I need to go into much detail regarding Yuriev and him sacrificing his own children to try and become a god or extend his own lifespan. But when it comes to characters embracing the lie and just going through it regardless of anything else, I think the biggest characters to embody this are Pellegri and Margulis. See, when Yuriev was on the move, Margulis pursues and attacks the Federation, determined to get his hands on the Zohar and finally return to Lost Jerusalem. I was told that apparently this held the key to destroying the Gnosis, but I'm unsure how true that is. Either way, he has proven himself a fanatic under the religion he serves, enough that he is harming Heinlein's plan. So eventually, Heinlein reveals himself as Wilhelm, and Margulis soon realizes he has been played like a fiddle. Pellegri likely discovered this as well, given her dialogue with Jin. Realizing that their entire mission in life was basically a waste, they duel Xion's group one more time, having nothing left at this point, since there's no way in hell they can fight the Testaments. And even if they did, what would be the point for them? They are not characters seeking redemption. Pellegri even admits her actions have been made pointless thanks to Wilhelm. So what do? They keep going with the lie, defending their so-called Holy Land, and basically sending themselves to their deaths. Or at least trying to take Jin with them. Pellegri in particular reveals that she is just tired of everything, not wanting to eject from her cockpit, and just die. Margulis, meanwhile, refuses to be captured alive and kills himself after he realizes he can't defeat Jin and the gang. Much like Xion, it was easier for them to go with the lie and the hatred than stand their ground, confront Wilhelm, and admit they were wrong. Or at the very least, they followed the one truth they had left, their hatred of Jin and his betrayal. Margulis even says his pride will not allow him to join, his obsession with killing Jin being the only thing to motivate him to do anything. It's a shame we didn't see more of their story throughout this series, as I'm sure the impact of this scene would have been amazing. It's still strong, of course, and cements Margulis as one of my favorite antagonists, but I still needed more. That being said, he had the best boss music in this game by far. As an example of stuff that was hinted at but never really given a full-on explanation, Jin and Pellegri had a relationship and the betrayal may have ruined that, yet there are no scenes I could find on it beyond them talking about it before their boss fight. At the very least, I did eventually learn the Cherenkov story was meant to give more insight into Margulis, showing that despite the fact that he hates people who waste their potential, even sacrifices a planet full of people for experiments, he values those hoping to prove themselves and wanting to become better. It makes things more understandable why the soldiers of Utic are so loyal to Margulis, for even if he is aggressive and would gladly sacrifice a planet of people he deems as useless, those under his command are valued because he sees potential in them. Could even be more relatable if they were rejected by others or just seeking a purpose no one else could give them. So now for the main question, what's the issue with Xion that makes me not like her despite all this good story stuff?
Oh, that's actually very simple. For you see, the game makes you want to punch her repeatedly.
I'm sure this is the moment you were waiting for. I defended Xion in both Game 1 and 2, and I can defend certain actions in Game 3. But I can only do so much by the time she rants like a madwoman, ignoring the truth presented to her and keeping up with the lie. Unlike with the other characters I dove into, while I do like her, I'm not super attached to her. And even in the span of 3 games, while she has developed, she really hasn't evolved into an interesting character. Or at the very least, this twist takes whatever was interesting about her and just shoves it down the drain to be shredded. Even with my defense of Game 2, I could barely even talk about her. The main issue comes when she is disturbingly attached to Kevin, and to be fair, she hasn't exactly had it easy, especially with the truth shoved right into her face and realizing she was the one to call the Gnosis to the universe, not Joachim Mizrahi. And this was on top of her seeing her parents murdered again, especially when she was able to finally understand and accept what her father was doing, which was to benefit the entire family. After such trauma, trying to cling to others is understandable, and she even tries to do so. But to a character who flat out admits that he caused you trauma, that's where my sympathy kinda dies. And the next issue comes when you realize that Kevin has had nothing interesting to his character that makes you want to see Xion with him. Throughout this past version, we have seen him as an asshole who doesn't really care about people and has to be pushed to care, like when Virgil was being taken care of by Fabronia. He only has one nice scene with the kid version of Xion, which even then has only made their interactions a tad creepier considering that he planned for a lot of these events. Supposedly.
Listen, you need to understand how the world works. For humans to live, we have to conquer and destroy and eat other organisms. That's the most basic function of an organic being. I'm sorry, Xion, but there's no point to what you're doing.
The flowers are all dead. They are all dead.
I told you, there's no point in this sort of thing. This isn't going to make anyone happy.
That's not true. If more of them bloom, everyone will notice.
You're wasting your time. They'll just get trampled again.
No, they won't.
Hey, where are you going?
I'm gonna get seeds from Feb.
Now I should note in these scenes, we do at least get some insight into his character. From the very beginning of the game, we do know how his life was destroyed by the Gnosis, and his mother sent him off planet as it was being destroyed. Combined with how we later find out about Wilhelm's influence, about an hour before the game ends mind you, I can kind of understand why he acts the way he does. And after much thought, I realized if Xion was the maiden to marry they need to complete their plan, it would have made sense to stay by her side, and feelings likely developed over time if he had to get close to her. Although again, that still kind of makes things creepy given their age difference. And then you remember what he is doing is not exactly redeemable, nor is he made out to be likable. One such example is forcing people to talk to Udu, resulting in their deaths and all for his selfish purpose. And all on behalf of Utic, the same organization who ruined Xion's life in the first place, along with some of her other friends too. And also responsible for a little thing, I'm not really sure. Oh right, chopping up 2 of Fabronia's siblings just to use the Zohar, which the game is oh so nice to remind us of that. He's even responsible for unleashing the 27 series Asura Realians, uncontrollable monsters, that admittedly I thought were Gnosis at first, that slaughtered Xion's parents and nearly killed her too. Also, his death? Near the end of the game, Xion asks if his death at the hands of a berserk KOS-MOS was real. He admits it was, and that was all part of his plan to become a testament and create more trauma for Xion. Now, he said this was done to make sure Xion remains alive, since Xion's mom was going to die anyway, and both were in contact with Udu, resulting in them fated to die. Even if they stopped talking to Udu, well, their bodies just can't take it. This is even hinted at throughout the game, not just with the conversations with Udu itself, but also with Xion fainting a lot. You can make a drinking game with how often this happens. All of this goodwill from Kevin is of course very hard to believe. He still antagonized Xion and made her life a living hell, as well as those around her, including her comrades, and he still expects her to love him. Hell, with him unleashing those Realians and killing her parents, no wonder Jin is ready to cut his ass down. If Kevin hadn't done that, he could have at least saved his dad and kept his mom alive a tad longer. Even if Kevin wasn't responsible for some events, like with Voyager gaining power, since that definitely wasn't his fault, he sure as hell isn't doing anything to stop it. He does everything in his power just to create more trauma for Xion, all for his own benefit, and trying to believe this love is genuine is impossible, or at the very least, unhealthy. Now, Xion likely doesn't know all the details, since some of those scenes in the past subconscious about Kevin don't even involve her present or even her past self. That's fair enough, but the evidence is still massive, and her brother is living proof of all the horrible shit Kevin did because Jin and his father were spying for the Federation. By the time the finale kicks off, Alan pretty much says what I have been going over, with how all the Testaments were afraid and just using their powers to bully and manipulate others for their own gain. And of course the only response Kevin has is to torture him with his Sith lightning blasts, all until Xion tries to stop him, which he doesn't do at first by the way, and KOS-MOS has to make the save. Which brings me to the next issue regarding Xion. Time. The game crams in most of this conflict right towards the end of the game. Now granted, there is stuff during and after the meeting with Kevin, but that's cut short by KOS-MOS, which is admittedly one of my favorite moments from the android. In fact,
KOS-MOS, don't do it. Come to me. Bring Xion here.
KOS-MOS! No, don't do it!
KOS-MOS!
Kevin Winnicott. I am very sorry, but unfortunately I am not programmed to follow your orders.
Are you trying to defy your creator?
The KOS-MOS that was created by you has been destroyed by t-elos, sir. I have different designers, Xion Uzuki, and also Mr. Alan Ridgely.
Impossible!
Xion, we will leave now.
No, KOS-MOS, stop! I don't want to go with you!
I must apologize. Action was needed to avoid danger.
I just wanted an excuse to play that. Anyway, with the scenes crunched down, I'm not given a lot of time to see why this is something positive for Xion to embrace, or even root to see the character get better. When she starts to whine and treat her comrades like crap, I'm just left hating her as a result. And no, I don't like ranting about her given what I have heard about Xion and the topic of depression. Look, part of the reason I have been trying to defend her is regarding how depression works, and to an extent, I can understand how some feelings simply can't be controlled. Sometimes you can't control your emotions or your negativity, and being stubborn about the problem only makes things worse, like with how Xion defies the wills of her friends so much, it eventually leads to an actual boss battle. It kinda reflects how you may fight against your own friends with your feelings, failing to see the logic in all of this. Being in an extreme emotional state doesn't lend itself to thinking logically all the time. It's not as if we can pause time to sort our emotions and choose a dialogue option in a video game. However, there's a big difference between my kind of depression and Xion's. She has friends willing to die for her. She has people who have likely taken so many magic spells and risk being turned to salt by the Gnosis, and an android who literally tanks shots for her and has also seen their suffering at the hands of godlike beings, and still has the balls to say how no one has ever tried to save her. Now I know what some of you are thinking. They did nothing for her after the revelation. To which I say they were too busy trying to defend her from the psychopath who flat out admitted he used her! By going with Kevin, which she wanted to do with no hesitation at all, explicitly expressing the desire on multiple occasions, she was giving her friends the biggest middle finger I have ever seen in gaming, and makes Akechi's betrayal look like an episode of Rugrats. No wonder they ended up fighting, because instead of wanting to see her turn better, I just wanted to join in on the attack. My friends were right in how Alan honestly deserves better than Xion. Sure, he was a coward, but when the chips were down, he was willing to fight and overcome his fear in this game. But what makes this worse is that even after Xion comes to her senses, they keep playing up the romance angle between her and Kevin, saying his love was legitimate. Let's get back to Xion and how no one saved her bullcrap. She keeps shutting herself away from people, not bothering to talk to her comrades, and any kind of sympathy shown her way is taken as pity and not good enough for her. I can understand shutting people out if they are unhelpful, but that usually requires some sort of effort in trying to get to them, like if they say keep ignoring your posts about your misery or even unfollow you, unable to take the negativity. Without seeing something similar to that, it makes sympathy for Xion far more difficult. Also, no one saved you, huh? Okay, did you help out Ziggy when Voyager was kicking the crap out of him? Did you help KOS-MOS at all when t-elos was whooping her ass? Or how about when Junior was trying to save Guinan from his Orochimaru of a father? No? Then shut up. When you don't make the effort to do the bare minimum, my sympathy goes down the drain. The only one I would blame out of everyone is Jin for being unable to actually talk with his sister. They seem to be doing fine in a missing year, yet here, they seem more distant after the event. I think even he realizes how bad this is when he calls himself pathetic, which just helps my argument of this guy not being good at conversations and ill-suited to be a therapist. But I can't blame him fully since I feel he was kind of in a losing situation when it came to talking about the truth. How do you explain to your sibling that they were basically Princess Elise and doomed mankind by crying? And even then, that doesn't excuse Kevin's toxicity. You know what this romance reminds me of? The relationship between Harley Quinn and the Joker, and how Harley was so easily played with by the Joker by believing the lie that he loved her, except in reality, he doesn't give a rat's ass about her. And if he does have feelings, he doesn't want to give them the time of day because he's a lunatic. Joker abuses Harley for his own benefit, much like how Kevin abused Xion for his own benefit. I can honestly say without a doubt in my mind that this is the worst romance I have ever dealt with in a video game, and felt nothing during those last moments with him. And Harley Quinn, while not exactly a saint by all means, you could probably do an entire video of all the horrible shit she's done, at least proved to be an entertaining enough character that you could feel sorry for her and want her to leave the Joker. She was stubborn, yes, sometimes frustratingly so, but she had what Xion didn't: time. Or at least that time was used more appropriately, as opposed to sticking me in a crappy 3-hour dungeon that was pointless. And yes, I am still bitter about that. Now, you might say she had 3 games, and that's a fair argument. But also remember how I said this game feels like 2 titles mashed together? Yeah, I doubt this helped her character. So it comes down to Udo making her a bit crazy, which if you can buy that explanation, then some of the issues are mitigated. It's just Virgil and Albedo still manage to be compelling, as well as hamming it up that it's hard to actually hate them. Even if Virgil has a smelling fetish he needs to get under control. What's also funny is that Albedo is actually one of the sanest people in this game. Dude never actually attacks the group, and even helps Junior during a showdown with his dad. He can still be a bit of an ass, but he's surprisingly more likable than Xion. All of that being said, playing this game series once more, I can at least appreciate the idea they were going for and how even the main protagonist was hardly any better than the antagonist she fought against, at least in some areas before she redeems herself. I may not like Xion, but I definitely love the theme she helped carry alongside some of the antagonists. And honestly, after seeing everything Kevin had to offer, yeah, I think he's worse by a wide margin. Like, the hate is not even close. Like, I think the only reason Xion gathered so much hatred while he's basically untouched is because he's the antagonist. Of course we're supposed to hate him, but now a sympathetic antagonist towards the end, and no. I'm sorry, but Kevin can go fuck himself. Fortunately, that's kind of the end of my negativity, as now I can finally talk about KOS-MOS. You might have noticed I rarely talked about her throughout these reviews. To be fair, there's a good reason. Her true purpose is only stated in this game, and she only forms a personality during it, forming it more clearly at the end of the game. Her purpose was to house the soul of a woman named Mary, a woman who followed Jesus. I'm not kidding, by the way. Xenosaga 3 goes full-blown into the religious stuff. Both she and Chaos are linked to Jesus, with Chaos being referred to as Yeshua. I'm not going fully into that as my eyes keep glazing over the explanation, so let's just focus on the robo-waifu. Anyway, KOS-MOS was meant to house her soul, but then Kevin decided t-elos should do it instead, using Mary's body, who I think was the person Virgil was trying to sniff up earlier. To make a long story short, KOS-MOS eventually awakens, fuses with t-elos after beating her once and for all, is presumed to be Mary, but it's revealed she developed her own consciousness towards the end. When Wilhelm seemingly has won the day with his godlike powers, KOS-MOS begins to comply to help him, until...
Very good. You have done well. With this, we will be able to live forever.
KOS-MOS!
What are you doing? Mary. You fool. Now this universe will be completely destroyed. Even Yeshua will perish. Mary, is this what you really want?
I am not Mary. I am KOS-MOS.
Much like how Ziggy and Junior defended Momo as her own person, KOS-MOS has managed to form a personality of her own. It's my favorite scene from the character, showing she has a will and that the android part of her did matter all this time. And you can argue this personality has developed over time, with how she became more receptive to Xion's will and trying to save people, risking her own life in dangerous situations like at the end of Game 1. Even in Game 3, before her full awakening, there are a few more examples, like being the only one Xion could confide in and giving her a hug. Also, her desire to be clean, even dusting herself off in some fights, then smacking a foe with her blade arm. Considering what happened with Xion, it's no wonder they went with promoting KOS-MOS more, allowing her to cross over into other games to the point where she has been referred to as the crossover queen. I will link to a tweet I liked by one account, because the amount of stuff she has been in surprised the hell out of me. I just wish I had more to say about her beyond KOS-MOS is awesome because she is KOS-MOS. Now for the finale and Wilhelm. Wilhelm as a character, despite all the build-up, I feel is only interesting based on his methodology. How he played all parties involved by being the secret head of many organizations, such as Ormus, the Federation, Vector, etc. Plus there's the general effect he had on all of those groups, especially Margulis. This segment of the finale is also where we learn more about Mary and Chaos and how they were around the time of Jesus being around. Like I said before, I will not be covering everything here since it's really crammed in here and not told as best as it can be. Instead, I will focus on the idea of eternal recurrence. See, the universe is apparently going to end one day, so Wilhelm believes this needs to be done to reset everything. Basically, it's almost exactly like the situation in SMT Nocturne, where the characters had to defeat the Kagetsuchi to shape the world according to their desires, or the desires of someone else. What makes Wilhelm's plan not so good, apart from his whole torturing Xion, killing lives, etc., is how things are never exactly improved. Change can still occur, perhaps so one day humanity can't fuck things up. However, Udu's mere presence is still able to drive some people to being insane, despite it not being evil. People like Yuriev and Voyager will keep existing, and those two weren't exactly easy to take down. And both of them were manipulated by Wilhelm. And don't forget his plan to use the maiden to Mary involves conflict no matter what, from manipulating the factions to even needing giant robots in order to fight the Gnosis. Wilhelm seems incapable of doing this without causing harm or heavily manipulating others. Humanity can change with his meddling, but no matter what, it's going to be a future painted in war and destruction like it is right now. And also they can one day hopefully not be like that, which is hard to do when you reset everything since they don't learn anything. With this kind of plan, their ability to evolve is kinda slim, and Wilhelm's intervention just creates a heavy reliance on him, even if the people don't know it, like with the UMN. Also, I would like to thank my friends for helping to explain this because, dear God, trying to decipher this with a wikia and this dialogue made my head ready to explode. And then I was told all this information is in even more side material, specifically a guidebook. That is in Japanese, although it has been translated thankfully. That doesn't stop me from being ticked off. I wanted to talk about more of this to have an excuse to talk about Nocturne, but at this point, sorry guys, I can't. While I get the reasoning why they splintered this stuff off due to not having multiple games and being forced to cram in as much as possible in Game 3, this still makes deciphering the story very frustrating, especially with the main villain. And when I was left asking more questions and constantly questioning everything, and needing to refer to a book, my ability to enjoy something drops drastically. Part of the reason I'm so hard on games with complicated themes is because other games have managed to put together a cohesive story without making me buy or look for extra material to know stuff about the main characters. At the very least, I will provide a link to the information if you are really interested. And if nothing else, this demonstrates how I don't like stories just because they have something important to say. I like stories with good characters that remain consistently enjoyable, even if there is an issue or two. And thankfully, Xenosaga is able to accomplish this, as the rest of the finale beyond Wilhelm, Xion, and Kevin is surprisingly enjoyable. Return to the theme of following the lie, the Gnosis themselves are revealed to carry souls, human ones at that. There are those who oppose the plan Chaos and Nephilim have in mind. Presumably they want the eternal recurrence to happen or something. According to Momo, who somehow knows this, the Gnosis are possibly afraid of what's going to happen when they become one with Nephilim. So much like our villains, they are unable to see past any kind of lie and default to destruction mode. Then again, I suppose you could call that the default option since, let's face it, when have we ever seen a friendly Gnosis? KOS-MOS can't defeat all of them, so Jin tries to return and even the odds, leading to both him and KOS-MOS to fall in battle, but buying everyone enough time to escape. Even if I don't get the full context of the story, even if I don't fully understand everything about Jin, it still hurt like hell to see him stabbed and killed as he did his best to buy his comrades some time. And despite some silly stuff like the Elsa sprouting energy wings out of nowhere, the finale does reveal an over-reliance on the UMN has basically crippled the universe, leaving mankind to start from scratch as they try to find Lost Jerusalem and hopefully function properly. That last bit in particular really spoke to me and how an over-reliance on stuff given to you or following a god could destroy your very way of living. Now granted, they are likely going to find a way to fix things, but without the ability to travel faster, it's not going to be fixed anytime soon. Hell, this was kind of proved earlier with how KOS-MOS was destroyed. Xion had no idea how to fix her, so they had to rely on the past version of Kevin to have plans for KOS-MOS. Had they not been lucky, I'm pretty sure the gang would be screwed royally.
And if you want some genuine more praise about the finale, this was still significantly better than the finale to Kingdom Hearts 3.
Overall, Xenosaga 3 is a good game, but the story of this entire series can be flawed, and honestly, there are some parts of this finale that reaffirm my belief that this series isn't exactly for me. There were many times my eyes just glazed over at certain scenes. I can't make sense of it without either going to a wikia, which I feel I should never have to do save for trying to remember something, or getting support from my friends who actually care about this series, and some elements I just didn't care about. Plus, the dialogue can sometimes have extra fluff to it just to drag out a scene. Fortunately, Xion addresses this with my favorite scene from her.
What do you want? Are you here to say a bunch of cryptic things again and confuse me? You're always like that. You just appear in front of me, say whatever you feel like, then just watch without actually doing anything.
However, replaying this series was probably the best thing I could have done for myself, as there are elements I was able to appreciate, character development I freaking love, and the finale, despite feeling rushed in places and makes me want to choke out Kevin and Xion, is still one of the most emotional finales to a series I ever experienced. It may not be in my top 10, but I still recommend checking this series out, and you may even find things I missed out on. At the very least, you always have YouTube and some of the stuff I linked in the last video. Speaking of which, I think my favorite storyline out of all of Xenosaga is surprisingly Pied Piper. It told a simple and easy to digest story, and I liked the characters involved. Kinda wished it was remade, like give it to an indie studio to polish up or something. Although now I'm kinda sadder that this series never caught on enough to warrant a remaster. At least Europe could benefit from that. Still, if it wasn't for Xenosaga, we may never have gotten the Xenoblade series, which I freaking love. Hell, it's the only reason I still have my Wii U. And yes, I still have my Wii U. But I'm not going to be covering those games for a long time, especially since I have Xenogears to look at, and I need a break from the complicated stories. My brain can't take much more of this, and I feel like I'm gonna faint like Xion did. This is kinda why I would have preferred to do a crossover with someone about this series. Fortunately, thanks to this game and the ramblings of the Dark Professor and his awesome side quests, I hunger for more giant robot games. While I can't cover Endless Frontier due to lacking a 3DS capture card, I can at least look at some of the games that can help you give a bit more context on that. Tune in next time, as we finally dive into the Super Nintendo era, and the origin of one of the greatest robot pilots of all time. Those who want to know more, well, let this theme song be the last hint I give. But for now, I want to close out with a quote from KOS, as KOS-MOS drifted out into space, sleeping.
I guess both you and I still exist in this world after all. As long as people, as long as the universe desires it, we will continue to exist. We haven't finished what we need to do yet. So, until then, sleep well, KOS-MOS.
Good night.